Okay, we're back with another episode of the Orville. As always, I'm Al, this is the Geek in Review, and I'm going to be talking about episode 3 of season 3 of the Orville New Horizons Morality Paradox. So if you haven't seen it, you know what's going on. So yeah, this was a pretty good one. I'm going to get into it in a minute, but yeah, a lot of good themes and a lot of the stuff that I was looking for from the first two episodes that weren't there. And there's nothing really fancy or high concept about this idea, despite sort of how it might initially come across. It was just a good old-fashioned episode of sci-fi. We got to see a lot more of the characters than we've seen in the first two episodes, with like Bortus and Gordon and Lamar and people like that. And yeah, like I'm really enjoying this show and this episode. The first one I was a bit iffy about, the second one I liked, but this one is by far my favourite episode. So anyway, Tal comes back from a home visit, but we don't see her on vacation on Slayet because we've seen that with the other security officer a few seasons ago. And as I said, we get some Bortus straight away and we find out that Gordon's got him working on his bikini body for his holidays. And, you know, I'm not sure if that's a joke or Gordon's actually trying to help Bortus out with that one. Their dynamic is pretty solid. You don't really get any back and forth for them in this episode too much. At least not as much as we're used to, but yeah, I'm glad that we're seeing the sort of crew comedy dynamic coming back. And it sticks throughout this episode. It's not sort of just dismissed, whereas in the first two there was maybe one or two jokes in the first 15 minutes, then that was kind of it for the majority of the episode. That's certainly not the case here. A lot of good and classic tropes in here, and it's a strange signal that gets detected, so they're on their way to a planet. And yeah, I like this thing, the sort of mystery drew me in straight away, and I liked when Star Trek used to do this. It doesn't really do it anymore, but going back to TOS and the Next Generation, when the crew would fly off to investigate something, that's exactly what the essence of the show was about. So they arrive at what they think is a derelict planet, but they're detecting 8.5 billion people living there in a huge civilization. And straight away I thought it was going to be like that DS9 episode where the Defiant crashes on the planet and then it goes back in time and they meet their descendants. But when they land, there's a bit more to the mystery in the fact that there's nothing there. They aren't even detecting any cities, there's no structures, and it just appears to be like a huge natural forest. And I do like the sexy new shuttles. This show has been getting a lot more sleeker and refined, and they're highlighting that in the way that the sets and the way that the designs and the production design looks. I think I've said it before, but they've got a few guys working on board now that did work on Star Trek The Next Generation, like Doug Drexler, and the love for the craft really reflects. It doesn't matter what show or project these guys are working on, it just adds to the production, and it all looks great here. And I like straight away how it's a sort of away team mission. The first two episodes were focused pretty much on Isaac and Claire, and although they were good tonally, they're very different to what we've been used to in the Orville, whereas this episode and the sort of story that they were setting up felt like one that would affect the whole crew, not just the one person focused in that story. So yeah, they arrive on the sort of weird, mysterious alien planet, and it just gets weirder because they end up in a sort of 21st century high school, and Gordon basically says it like it is.
What is this place?
An old Earth high school in the middle of the forest on an alien planet.
But they get trapped inside, and I did think it was going to be a little bit like that TNG episode Royale, where they get trapped in the crappy hotel based on the novel, and it sort of is, but there's a lot more to this show than that. But while the crew were on the planet, I did like seeing Lamar being in charge. We've barely seen him since the start of the season, and I don't think we got too much of him in season 2 either. It's been a while, so it's kind of hard to remember. But seeing him in the captain's chair reminded me of the old TOS episodes when Scotty was running the bridge when Spock and Kirk were on the planet. And yeah, I like it. Look, I hope they give Lamar a bit more development this season than they have in the last one. But initially I was like, what the sort of hell's going on with these guys in the high school? No one was acting any different to seeing the crew there or their uniforms, so I thought that maybe it was the sort of Hotel Royale idea where the aliens had maybe intercepted signals of Riverdale or Saved by the Bell or maybe even Mean Girls and turned that into a reality.
You have a 5-head.
But no, that's not the case. That would have been interesting. But no, we don't get that. Yeah, I love how bizarre this show gets early on in the episode. We've got a mysterious disappearing civilization, a high school in the middle of the woods, and then a monster attacks them all. And just the what the fuck of going on in this episode, I've not had that in a sci-fi show for a while, at least not one that's any fun. It channeled a lot of the old 60s sci-fi shows, and I'm not just talking about Star Trek here, but Voyage to the Bottom of the Sea, Lost in Space, and of course The Twilight Zone and The Outer Limits. And yeah, this is just like really good fun stuff that we don't sadly get in any television format or any sort of storytelling these days. Maybe it's got to be because every show now has to be this highbrow idea instead of just weird and fun, and I hope the Orville keeps this up. The first episode was very dark. The second episode, yeah, it was pretty dark, and this is the first fun one that we've really had. But yeah, the Ed Kelly dynamic is back, sort of. There's a few good moments between them, but I think as characters they work better when they're on their off hours rather than Captain as Commander. And yeah, that's not really here. That's not a huge criticism or a letdown or anything. I still enjoyed everything about the episode and the away mission. And the characters, it's something that personally I wish was added in. And even Tala and Gordon, they get their own sort of little stories here. And yep, I've missed them. I've never really liked Tala, to be honest. But she fits in perfectly well in this episode and doesn't bother me. And Gordon, I always feel is an underused character no matter what they do with him. I think he's probably my favourite character in the show. And like Lamar, I hope we get to see him do a little bit more this season. But yeah, I love the guessing game of this episode. And then you sort of think it's all solved and then it's a Kaelon weapon, which does make sense. It's a sort of Matrix holodeck type thing used to pacify a civilization. And then they kind of suggest that it might be part of a larger threat that's out there. And that does also raise a lot of questions about what's going on, because it's called New Horizons, and then also how would this weapon affect Isaac. But the whole time I was thinking, are they really back on the ship, or are they still in some sort of simulation like the TNG episode Future Imperfect? And yeah, the episode gets a lot weirder. We find out that it was never Tala that came back from vacation, so she was never on the ship. And yeah, I was kind of right about that, I suppose. And when we find out that it's this weird sort of Tron lady alien, it's not been Tala all along, that was a good twist, especially when we find out that it's one of the aliens or one of the species that worshipped Kelly in one of the previous episodes where time moved differently. So when I said that I did think it might be something involving the time travel with the Define, going back in that episode of DS9 with the Meet the Descendants, I wasn't wrong on that one either. This show and this episode in particular is putting together a lot of ideas, and it works and it flows really well. The characters are all great together, their presence is great, and the pace of the episode and the reveals and the mystery are also handled really well. But yeah, I love how they're following up a story from a previous episode. It does add to the continuity and world building of this show. And we find out that species took a really interesting direction, sort of like the Q. They can now make their own realities and they're all immortal. So this whole thing has been a study of facing death. And yeah, if you're immortal, I guess you'd want to understand that. And this is a really good creative idea for the show. And I thought, let's be honest, this was something that I was going to see in Strange New Worlds and something that we haven't got yet. But at the moment I'm not really holding my breath. And this is exactly what I hoped this show was going to do moving forward. And what I did find odd was at the end when they're talking about facing your own death. That's a very Strange New World story thing that's going on at the moment in that show. And what bothers me is that Orville got this all out the way in one episode rather than dragging it out as a character arc for a season or more. And yes, New Trek, especially Discovery and Strange New Worlds, does have some pacing issues, and it could maybe learn a little thing from the Orville, because the Orville is certainly borrowing a few old tricks from Trek. But anyway, this is my favourite episode of the new season so far. All the key elements that I've been looking for from the Orville are here, and Seth MacFarlane has now pretty much introduced his version of the Q to the franchise. And yeah, it was a lot better than how Q was handled in Picard Season 2 when you think about it. Like, don't even try and counter that argument. Come on, man, that's common sense. And this species has a lot of possibilities for the show as well. I'm going to be very excited to see what they're going to do with it. But as always, this is just my opinion. Let me know what you think in the comments below. Please leave a like on the video, and if you haven't done already, please subscribe to the channel. My name's Al, thanks for watching.